A band of rogue Confederate soldiers encounter mysterious supernatural beings while on the run after robbing a bank. Sound cool? Because I'm here to talk about Deadbirds from 2004. So, this film was directed by Alex Turner, a guy with a pretty sparse body of work, I've noticed. This was his feature-length debut after two short films that he did, and he only directed one more movie in 2009 before disappearing from the industry pretty much entirely from what I could see. Deadbirds is not a super well-known film, but I had seen it mentioned a few times over the last few years in, a pretty positive light. I'd seen the DVD in stores on the used shelf over the years, and the cover alone kind of made me avoid it, I'll admit. I mean, first off, it looks very of its time and horribly dated, the cover I'm talking about. And second, you never show the monster on the cover. That's a rule for me. But if you look a little deeper, you might find a few things that will interest you, like I did. Like the writer being Simon Barrett, someone who would become much more prominent working with people like Adam Wingard. And this was also his feature-length debut, and he would spend the next 20 years doing some pretty high-profile stuff. Check him out if you aren't familiar. And also, you have a pretty decent cast here. I mean, there's a few weak links, but you have people like Henry Thomas as the lead. Obviously, you'll know him for playing Elliot in E.T. pretty famously, and he's worked pretty consistently over the years. Lately, he's been doing a bunch of stuff with Mike Flanagan, and I think that's awesome. But you also get people like Isaiah Washington, Mark Boone Jr., and a fairly young Michael Shannon, who I really love. And instantly, with this movie, I'm reminded of The Burrowers from 2008, another Civil War-era horror film, which I actually liked more than Deadbirds. And with a tight 91-minute runtime, I mean, this movie does a good job at cutting to the chase with nice pacing, not rushed, not too drawn out. You can tell they just kind of wanted to spend most of the time for the main story to unfold, which is how I kind of like it. So in the beginning, you see a small group of Confederate soldiers led by William, played by Henry Thomas. They ride into a small town where they rob a bank. It's a pretty brutal scene, actually, with heads shot off, throats slit, and a small child is even killed by a stray bullet, which I did not expect. The soldiers get their gold and leave town, finding an abandoned plantation house to hide out in for the night. And on the way there, they stumble upon some pretty weird things, like a crucified dead scarecrow man and a weird naked human bird-like creature. Once they get to the house, it's deserted, but seems fine. But as they settle in, things start going wrong, and there's definitely something evil lurking in this house. I have some pretty mixed feelings about this one. I think it could have. I think that it turned out as well as it possibly could have, really, with a still fairly inexperienced writer and director. The story is not super original, but what is anymore? I mean, it being set during the Civil War is pretty cool, though. And on that note, I would actually like to see more horror westerns. There's a few that I'm aware of, and I think there's more that you could do, combining those two. And like I said, the cast here is pretty decent. Henry Thomas gives a solid performance, as does Isaiah Washington, an escaped slave who you get the impression was maybe freed by William. So they seem to kind of have a history together. Michael Shannon is really good at playing a despicable asshole, as only he can do. Mark Boone Jr. is a well-known character actor, and he's always good at what he does as well. The suspense here is pretty decent. I didn't find this film to be particularly scary, and I think that that's mainly due to the very dated-looking CGI that's used maybe a little bit too much. But it's not all CGI here. There's some decent practical effects, but there should have been no CGI used here, and the film would have been better for it. That said, it's a solid film. It probably won't blow your mind, but it's not a waste of time either. And if supernatural horror is your cup of tea, you might, like it a little more than most. The Western vibes are cool, but I prefer The Burrowers and Bone Tomahawk. If you haven't seen those two, check them out. But if you've already seen those, check this one out too. I'm giving Deadbirds a 5.5 out of 10. Cheers, guys.